Sacred statues moving on their own, eyes opening and staring directly at the people standing before them. All of it captured inside the most holy places on earth. Some believe these are signs of Jesus' second coming. Others believe they are warnings that the world is running out of time. Keep your eyes open, because you are not going to believe what happens next. Number 1. Virgin Mary blinking eyes, chapel. This video just resurfaced online, and trust me, it is not something you are going to forget easily. A guest was inside a small chapel, quietly recording a prayer service on their phone. Nothing about that moment felt unusual. People were praying, the atmosphere was calm, and the camera slowly drifted toward a statue of the Virgin Mary standing at the front of the room. Everything looked exactly the way it always does inside a chapel. Peaceful, ordinary, normal. And then the statue opened its eyes. Not slightly, not in a way you could brush off. The stone eyelids slowly lifted, the eyes opened fully, and they looked straight into the camera. Those eyes stayed open for several seconds before they slowly closed again, and the statue returned to its usual stillness. For the man standing in that chapel, this was not a trick of the light or a glitch in the footage. It was confirmation of something he now believed with every part of him. There was a spirit living inside that statue. Number 2. Final breath. 700-year-old crucified Christ statue. Good Friday, the most sacred day in the entire Christian calendar. The congregation is gathered, heads bowed, deep in prayer. And at the front of that church stands a crucified Jesus statue that is 700 years old. 700 years. This is not some modern decoration. This is a sacred relic that has stood through centuries of history, wars, generations of worshipers, and hundreds of Good Friday services just like this one. As the prayers in the room reached their most intense moment, something happened that nobody in that building was prepared for. The statue's head, which had been hanging low on its chest the way it always does, slowly lifted upward. Not slightly. Not in a way you could explain away with a quick glance. The head rose and held itself up, as if the figure was looking straight up toward the heavens one final time. The room went into complete shock. People who were there say the silence that followed was unlike anything they had ever experienced inside a church, because what they believed they were witnessing was the exact moment Jesus took his final breath before going still. Right there, in front of them, on Good Friday. Now, officials did come forward with an explanation. They suggested that the old ropes holding the statue's head in position had simply shifted after centuries of wear. And maybe that is true, but here is what nobody could explain away. Out of all the days that statue had stood in that church across 700 years, it chose that specific moment, during the most sacred prayer of the most sacred day of the Christian year, to move for the very first time. That is not a coincidence that sits comfortably with people, and it should not sit comfortably with you either. Number 3. Theater miracle. A religious play was being performed that night, and the theater was full of people who had come to watch and celebrate their faith. As part of the production, several sacred statue figures were positioned around the stage, standing still and silent the way statues are supposed to. Nobody in that audience had any reason to expect anything beyond a normal, enjoyable evening. They came to watch a play, and that was exactly what they thought they were going to get. But something happened on that stage that nobody in that building was prepared for. While every single figure stood completely frozen and still, the head of one statue slowly began to turn. And this was not a tiny, barely noticeable movement that only 1 or 2 people at the front happened to catch. It was clear enough for the entire audience to see from their seats. The crowd completely lost it. People were screaming, jumping out of their seats, grabbing each other, and pointing at the stage because none of them could believe what they were watching with their own eyes. After the show ended, the theater staff decided to examine the statue themselves rather than let the whole thing go unanswered. What they found only made the situation more difficult to explain. The figure was a solid wooden carving with no wires attached to it, no hidden compartment built into it, and no person tucked inside operating it from within. Just solid wood that had somehow moved its own head in front of a room full of witnesses with no explanation whatsoever. Many people who heard this story came to the same conclusion. They believed that Jesus himself showed up in that theater briefly that night to personally acknowledge the faith and devotion being displayed before him on that stage. And honestly, when you consider that there is absolutely no other explanation that holds up, that conclusion does not feel as far-fetched as it might sound. Number 4. Whispering Jesus, Cathedral. A traveler was visiting a cathedral one busy afternoon and decided to pull out their phone and record the beautiful altar the way any tourist would. Nothing about that moment felt significant. The cathedral was full of people going about their visit. The atmosphere was calm, and the large statue of Jesus Christ at the altar was standing exactly the way it always had. Still, silent, unmoved. That was about to change in a way that nobody in that cathedral was ready for. Without any warning, the stone eyes of the statue began to shift. The hands stayed still and the head stayed still. But those eyes started moving, slowly scanning across the crowd of people gathered in that space, as if the statue was actively looking at them. The traveler kept recording because what was happening in front of them did not feel real. And then the lips started moving, rhythmically and deliberately, as if the statue was whispering something directly to the people standing before it. Then just as suddenly as it all began, the figure went completely still again, leaving everyone in that cathedral standing in stunned silence. Many people who watched the footage believe this was a sign of the second coming. But the question that nobody has been able to answer is this: what exactly was it whispering? Number 5. Talking statue, Paraguay. A woman was home alone in Paraguay, relaxing quietly in her house on what seemed like a completely ordinary day. Then she heard it, a soft whispering sound coming from somewhere inside the house. She sat up and listened more carefully because she knew for certain that nobody else was home with her. She followed the sound through the house, moving from room to room, trying to locate where it was coming from, and what she found stopped her completely in her tracks. The whispering was coming directly from her family's Virgin Mary altar. She grabbed her phone and started recording. The footage she captured showed the mouth of the statue moving and opening wide, as if the figure was genuinely speaking out loud to her. But the moment she took a step closer to get a better look, everything stopped immediately. The statue went silent and completely still, as if it had just issued her a warning to stay back and not come any closer. Number 6. Parade Awakens, Mexico. In 2016, the streets of Saltillo, Mexico were packed and alive with people celebrating a Catholic holiday parade. Music was playing, the crowd was joyful, and a statue of Jesus was being carried through the streets the way it had been carried through many parades before. It was a normal, festive, celebratory day, and nobody expected anything beyond that. But then the people carrying the statue noticed something that made them slow down, and word quickly spread through the crowd. The statue's head was moving from side to side, not being shaken by the movement of the people carrying it, but actually moving on its own in a slow and deliberate way. And then the eyes began blinking repeatedly, as if the figure had just woken up from a long sleep and was now looking out over the massive sea of people surrounding it, scanning the crowd and taking in every single face gathered there that day. The entire procession came to a halt. Number 7. Our Lady of the Turning Eyes, 1643, Germany. In 1643, in the town of Rottweil in Bavaria, which is now modern-day Germany, 42 local parishioners gathered together and witnessed something that none of them could explain. A statue of Madonna and Child physically turned and raised her eyes upward toward heaven. Not a small tremor, not a vibration. The statue turned and lifted its eyes toward the sky and then slowly brought them back down toward the city below. 2 weeks after that, the face of the statue turned red and the eyes began shedding tears. Now here is where this story goes, from shocking to absolutely extraordinary. At the exact time all of this was happening, Germany was in the middle of the 30 Years' War, and French troops had the country under siege. But as the statue was moving and weeping, something remarkable happened on the battlefield. German troops pushed back and defeated the French forces. That victory was directly and publicly attributed to the miracle of the statue by the people who witnessed it. The statue moved, the war turned. You decide what that means. Number 8. Church ceremony. Nobody saw it happen. That is the part that makes this story so unsettling. A church ceremony was taking place and everything about it felt completely routine. The priest stood calmly at the altar reciting prayers while members of the congregation recorded the moment on their phones the way people often do during special services. The energy was peaceful, the prayers were flowing, and the service continued without interruption from beginning to end. Not a single person in that room noticed anything unusual while it was happening. It was only afterward, when people sat down and reviewed their footage at home, that everything changed. Because right there in the recordings, clear as day, the statue of Jesus had moved its hand slowly forward during the service. The position it ended up in looked completely intentional, like the figure was deliberately extending its hand outward to offer a blessing to every single person sitting in that room. Nobody saw it happen in real time, but the cameras caught every second of it. Some blessings are only revealed to those who are paying close enough attention. Number 9. Ballinspittle Phenomenon, Ireland, 1985. In the summer of 1985, something happened in the tiny village of Ballinspittle in County Cork, Ireland, that the entire country could not stop talking about. Locals had reported seeing a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary moving on its own, not just shifting slightly, but actually floating in midair. Word spread from neighbor to neighbor and then beyond the village and then beyond the county until it reached the entire nation. What started as a local rumor turned into something nobody could have predicted. A total of 250,000 people traveled from all across Ireland and descended onto this small village just to see the statue for themselves. And here's what makes this truly remarkable. News reporters covering the story found that 7 out of 10 people who stood in front of that statue witnessed it moving with their own eyes. The sightings then began spreading to other parts of Ireland, making 1985 the year that went down in history as the year of the moving statue. Nobody has explained it since. Number 10. Weeping Statue, New Mexico. A 7-foot-tall bronze Our Lady of Guadalupe statue in Hobbs, New Mexico, started weeping, and the diocese of the local church had absolutely no natural explanation for it. But here is the thing that makes this story different from most. This was not the first time it happened. It was the 4th time since May alone, and it had been weeping repeatedly since spring 2018. 4 separate occasions of clear liquid streaming down the face of a bronze statue, and not a single official explanation that held up. Scientists and experts were brought in to analyze the substance, and what they found was genuinely puzzling. The liquid had the exact chemical makeup of scented olive oil, the same kind used in holy ceremonies like baptism. Some people suggested that the oil had simply been stored inside the hollow bronze figure and was slowly releasing over time. But if that were true, it should have run out and stopped long before the 4th occurrence. It never stopped. One witness who stood in front of the statue described the experience in a way that stuck with everyone who heard it. She said she stood there looking at it thinking this cannot be happening, but it was happening, right in front of her. And she said that was the moment her faith grew more than it ever had before. Number 11. Madonna and the Blood, Argentina. A Virgin Mary statue in Argentina has cried blood 38 times, not once as a single unexplained event that could be brushed off and forgotten. 38 documented, filmed, and witnessed occasions of blood streaming down the face of a statue. The statue belongs to the Frias family, and the owner, Rosana Mendoza Frias, has filmed it herself and spoken about it publicly to multiple media outlets. She explains that the statue was given to her after she suffered a miscarriage and that it first began crying blood in April 2017. Since then, it has never truly stopped, but the tears of blood are not even the most remarkable part of this story. Rosanna claims that the statue has been performing miracles. One visitor who came to see the weeping figure had a tumor that completely disappeared shortly after her visit. Word spread and pilgrims began traveling from everywhere just to stand in front of it, 38 times, and the phenomenon is still continuing. Number 12. Holy Fire, Church Prayer Service. A prayer service was underway, and the congregation was deep in worship when something happened at the altar that nobody in that building had ever seen before in their lives. As the hymns filled the hall, a large wooden cross suddenly burst into bright flames. The room froze completely. But here is what separated this from any ordinary fire. The flames did not crackle. They did not spread to anything around the cross. Instead, they wrapped around the wood like a glowing veil, burning steadily and brightly without consuming a single inch of the wood underneath. People immediately raised their phones to record what they were seeing. Some fell straight to their knees. When it was all over, witnesses confirmed there was no smoke, no heat, and absolutely no damage left on the cross. The wood was completely untouched. Skeptics suggested hidden effects were responsible, but nobody could produce a single piece of evidence to support that claim. Believers have one name for what happened that day: Holy Fire. Number 13. Egyptian Statue, Manchester, England. In 2014, a museum in Manchester, England found itself at the center of a story that spread across the world almost overnight. An ancient Egyptian statue called Nebsanu, believed to date all the way back to 1800 BCE, was turning around inside its display case on its own, every single day. Curator Campbell Price was the first to notice it, and he was genuinely disturbed by it because he was the only person who held the key to that case. Nobody else had access. He and his team set up a time-lapse camera to get to the bottom of it, and what the footage revealed was undeniable. The statue was moving by itself during the day and then stopping completely at night. Scientists eventually stepped forward and suggested that vibrations from the footsteps of museum visitors during opening hours were rotating the figure. That explanation covered the daytime movement. But the fact that it stopped completely every single night when the museum was empty, that part was never explained. Number 14, altar change, Good Friday Mass. A church full of worshipers was gathered for Good Friday Mass, and the service was moving along the way it always does. Prayers were being recited, candles were burning low at the altar, and the crucified Jesus statue stood at the front of the room the way it always had. Nothing about that environment suggested that anything unusual was about to take place, but then people started noticing something that made their blood run cold. The head of the crucified Jesus statue was moving, slowly and gently, just enough for person after person in those pews to look up from their prayers and lock eyes on what was happening at that altar. A quiet panic moved through the room like a wave as more and more people realized they were all seeing the same thing. Someone captured it on video, and within hours, the footage was all over the internet, pulling fierce and emotional reactions from millions of viewers worldwide. No experts came forward with an explanation. No official statement was ever issued. But for every person who was sitting in that church on that specific day, no explanation was ever going to be necessary anyway. Number 15, Goddess Blink, Linquan Temple. China visitors were gathered at the Linquan Temple in China, doing what most people do when they visit a beautiful and sacred place. They were taking photos and recording videos of the magnificent golden statue of Guanyin, the goddess of mercy. The statue stood tall and golden with its eyes fixed in the calm, peaceful gaze that it had always held. Everyone was watching through their phone screens, capturing the moment, completely relaxed. Then those eyes blinked. The heavy eyelids of the statue closed completely and then opened again slowly, as if the figure had just woken up from an incredibly long sleep and was now fully present in that temple with the people standing before her. The crowd watching through their screens could not believe what they had just witnessed in real time. The video spread to millions of people around the world, and the debate about what actually happened that day has never been resolved. Witnesses have one explanation: the goddess blinked because she was listening. Number 16, Ganesha and the Milk, India, 1995. Ganesha is one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Hindu faith, recognized across the world by his distinctive elephant head. It is a long-standing tradition for Hindu worshippers to leave milk offerings for the god of beginnings as a sign of devotion. But in September 1995, something happened during this ordinary act of worship that shook an entire nation to its foundation. People began reporting that Ganesha statues were actually drinking the milk being offered to them. A worshipper would hold a spoon of milk up to the statue's lips, and the liquid would simply disappear, absorbed completely as if the statue had swallowed it. The story hit national headlines across India almost immediately and spread to Hindu communities all around the world. Temples were flooded with crowds of people rushing to witness it for themselves. Some declared it an outright miracle. Others called it mass hysteria. But here is what nobody could argue with. An entire nation of over 1 billion people stopped everything and paid attention. Number 17, Ghostly Woman, Church CCTV. Security cameras inside a church recorded something during what appeared to be a completely quiet and empty night that has left everyone who watched the footage deeply unsettled. The hall looked exactly the way an empty church hall looks at night, still, dark, and completely undisturbed. Nothing was moving and nothing seemed out of place. And then something appeared near the holy icons at the front of the hall, a figure, faint and gray and almost completely transparent, but shaped unmistakably like a woman. She did not appear suddenly or dramatically. She simply became visible, the way a shape gradually comes into focus when your eyes adjust to the dark. And then she began to move. Her steps were slow and deliberate, carrying her steadily toward the holy icons, as if she knew exactly where she was going and exactly why she was there. She was not wandering. She was not drifting aimlessly the way people imagine ghosts to move. Every step she took was purposeful and filled with intention. She reached the icons and stayed there for a moment before the footage ended. Some people who studied this video believe she was an interdimensional pilgrim, a soul that had crossed back into this world for one final blessing before moving on permanently. And when you watch that footage and see how deliberately she moved toward those icons, that explanation becomes very hard to dismiss. St. John Brebeuf Church, Illinois. A prayer gathering was taking place at St. John Brebeuf Church in Niles, Illinois, when something appeared on the wall of the church that silenced every single person in that room. A faint light showed up on the stone wall. At first it was dim and easy to dismiss as a reflection or a trick of the lighting inside the building. But then it began to grow brighter, and as it grew brighter, it began to take shape. A very specific and unmistakable shape. The glowing form that emerged on that wall had large feathered wings spreading out from a central figure, looking exactly like the depiction of a celestial being that every person in that room had grown up seeing in religious art and scripture. It held that shape clearly and steadily against the stone wall for several long moments before it slowly faded away and disappeared completely. The video was shared widely online and sparked a debate that is still ongoing. But for the people who were standing inside that church and watched it happen with their own eyes, the debate was already settled. Number 19. Blinking Buddha, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. In 2011, worshippers at the Pujian Service Center in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, witnessed something that spread through the country like wildfire. Multiple golden Buddhist statues inside the temple were seen blinking, moving their lips, and appearing to breathe all at the same time. Not one statue, multiple statues, all showing signs of life simultaneously. Someone present pulled out their phone and started recording immediately. Now, the video quality is not great, and that is important to be honest about. Phone cameras in 2011 were nowhere near the quality of what we have today, so the footage is grainy and difficult to examine closely. The temple was also very bright inside, which led some people to suggest the whole thing was simply a trick of the light playing on the golden surfaces of the statues. Those are fair points to raise, but here is what keeps this story alive. Nobody has ever been able to watch that footage and say with complete certainty that the statues are not moving. Nobody. Number 20. Walking Jesus Statue, Rome Church. Everything inside the Rome Church was completely normal. People were gathered in prayer, the atmosphere was calm, and the service was moving along without any sign of what was about to happen. And then the Jesus statue at the front of the room stood up and began to walk. Not shift, not tilt, not vibrate. Walk. With deliberate, forward-moving steps toward the exit of the room. The people inside that church watched it happen with their own eyes, and the room erupted into complete shock and disbelief. Someone was recording and caught the statue moving toward the door before the video cut off abruptly, leaving everyone who has ever watched that footage with the same burning question about what happened next. Here's the part that makes this story impossible to forget. After that day, the statue was never found. Not inside the church, not anywhere. The people who were present believe to this day that what they witnessed was Jesus himself, arriving in physical form. And with no statue to account for, nobody has been able to prove them wrong.